we use the term crisis a lot in this world, but I really want to emphasize now that the people of Myanmar are really living in a severe crisis at the moment, no matter how one defines that term. Before the military takeover, the United Nations was supporting 1 million people affected by the conflict here inside the country. And that number, the number of people in need of humanitarian assistance now is 3 million. That's a tripling over the last 8 months. And in addition to that, there are now 20 million people living below the poverty line, nearly half the population. And that's a rate of poverty that we haven't seen in Myanmar for at least 20 years. Now, most of those people that I mentioned below the poverty line are not yet part of our humanitarian caseload, but they could become part of that. And we're working hard to make sure that they don't. But I think, I guess let me just say that the crisis that we are seeing today is really the result of a compound effects of conflict, which is increasing, COVID-19, which especially the sort of devastating third wave in the summer, and of course the military takeover in February. So effectively what we have here is a crisis on top of a crisis with yet another crisis on top of that. The 3 million people that are now in need of humanitarian assistance are in many of the border areas of the country, in Cayenne, in Kachin, in northern Shan, Kaya, but also in the urban and peri-urban parts of Yangon and Mandalay, in the center of the country, which has essentially very rarely seen any conflict in the past. Over 200,000 people have been newly displaced since the 1st of February due to the conflict between the Myanmar armed forces, many of the ethnic armed organizations, and these newly formed People's Defense Forces. Essentially, I mean, the situation, again, to stress, is quite desperate. And here on the ground, humanitarians are working around the clock to provide people with humanitarian assistance. And I think that's the second point that I really want to emphasize here, is that the United Nations and its humanitarian partners continue to stay and deliver for the people of Myanmar. As we speak, well, not quite as we speak, we're in the middle of a nighttime curfew period here, but I mean, our colleagues are on the ground. They're delivering food and cash assistance. They're improving access to healthcare, water and sanitation, and other basic services. Since February, our food and cash assistance has reached more than 1.4 million people in rural communities all around the country, as well in some urban and peri-urban centers in the country as well. More than 660,000 people have received various protection-related services, including child protection, gender-based violence services, and psychosocial support, all in conflict-affected areas. Around 260,000 people in conflict zones have received temporary shelter support, and 330,000 people have benefited from improved water facility, access to water, sanitation, and hygiene services. So, I guess really what I'm saying is that we are saving lives. We are making a difference in people's well-being, but we're also quite frustrated that these numbers aren't higher, and that we aren't able to reach all of the 3 million people who we know need urgent humanitarian assistance. So, a few words on the reasons and I guess the challenges, if you will. First, there are really significant operational challenges. Travel, COVID-19 restrictions, roadblocks, and overall insecurity are definitely main reasons we can't reach everybody we want to. And I think it's really incumbent upon me to take this opportunity to call on all parties to use their influence to facilitate the safe and unhindered access for humanitarian workers and also our humanitarian supplies. But second, we're also not able to further scale up our response due to limited funding. I mean, despite the multiple crises that I described, our response is really remains underfunded. We have requested a total of $385 million to reach those 3 million people this year. To date, we've received about a third of that. And that means that we have a funding gap of roughly $250 million just for this year. And that means, in turn, that we really won't be able to reach everybody who needs our assistance. So, yeah, again, I appeal to all partners to consider what support they can provide to help us continue to provide services through the end of the year. The United Nations Emergency Relief Coordinator has confirmed a new SURF allocation of $10 million for Myanmar, and of course that will help. But much more is still needed to prevent suffering. Thirdly, and I guess lastly, I think we really need the parties to the conflict here to sort of depoliticize, if I can say it that way, our humanitarian and COVID-19 response efforts, which remain guided by the principles of humanity, impartiality, independence, and neutrality. Essentially, we need access, which is safe and unimpeded, so we can reach those 3 million people in need. Thank you.